All right, hello and welcome to Between the Liars with Ryan and Josh.
Hello there.
And we're joined by a special guest returning, Tony.
Hi, how you doing?
He has a photo this time. He's got a video picture, live and in person.
Hey, last time I was in my friend's bedroom because we were moving in. So I'm in my own bedroom. I got stuff set up. This door behind me, it's actually my vocal booth. It's so nice. It's nice to have everything set up.
Everybody's moving.
Well, everything.
That's why my Wi-Fi is still garbage. I apologize in advance to everybody. Today, we're going to be discussing some of the Democrats' latest spending assignments. They passed that giant bill in an effort to decrease inflation. We're going to focus on the green initiatives that they included in there, and then also the IRS. So why don't we start by talking just about the EPA in general? If you don't know what that is, the Environmental Protection Agency, they've got quite a bit of unilateral power. I find the three-letter branches of the government to be rather interesting. But what do you guys think on the EPA, since they'll be the enforcement on this portion?
It is the one good thing Nixon did. You can go back and look at photos of the air in the 60s and 70s out among like any of the United States big cities, and it just looks awful. You look at some of the pictures of the rivers and waterways, and they were just atrocious. There was no financial interest for the corporations to take care of them, so they just didn't. And a lot of living conditions have improved through a large part of the country for a lot of people because of a lot of the initiatives and policies that the EPA maintains.
Not even just that, but like the work that it provides too, I think is very important. Like it actually creates, physical jobs for people to have. I don't have a whole lot on the EPA though. I'm not gonna.
No, that's fine. We'll start there. We'll keep narrowing it. Green initiatives. Do we think they work? What do we think on them? I'll actually share the screen here in a second with just kind of the summary that the Senate put up. But what are your general takes on green initiatives?
Take the floor, Mr. Josh.
Yeah, I would say a lot of it can come down to individual policies and how money is sliced up and what they're going towards. Because this bill obviously includes a lot of different things. It includes specific grants for local energy programs and making more efficient local energy grids, along with fundings for electric vehicles to go to manufacturer subsidies on those ends, to competitive grants that states can craft programs around and compete to see who gets their slice of the federal programs, which I find particularly interesting because I get the angle that these competitive programs help increase different takes of different attempts at the different approaches. However, at the same time, it also feels weird to have, like, if there is going to be a chunk of money being thrown around for these initiatives, to not try to help all of the states and not have like, oh, well, 20 of the states get it because their programs are better than the other 30. Come on. They all need this monies to go towards these different initiatives.
Okay, I am not gonna lie, I forgot the question. Can you what was the question again?
What do you think about like green initiatives in general? Because this isn't the first one that they've passed, not the first one that they've done. We'll go through the specifics in a second here, but do you think green initiatives work?
When you say green initiatives, you mean like laws that we pass for companies to essentially like do better with their waste and sort of things?
That would be included, yes, as well as like allocations of dollars for like what Josh was mentioning with like, let's say they put in like a charging port for like cars, like they give them grant money to be able to do that, things like that.
I mean, I think that it's like one of those things where it's like, it sounds great in theory, but if it's not done well in practice, then it doesn't really matter. You know what I mean? Like, I think that having like certain sorts of regulations so that companies can't just, do whatever they want with their waste, that change just confused me. I'm not gonna lie, I wasn't ready for it. I was looking at the screen, I was like, whoa, where'd I go?
I actually didn't mean to add it right away.
I think that, if it's not done correctly, it's just the companies with more money are just gonna pay the lawmakers or pay whoever they need to just essentially keep breaking the laws and still get the benefits. Yep. And that's why it's one of those things. It's like, we just need to kind of do away with. I think it all comes back, like every topic that we will ever have, I can promise you, I'm going to find a way to blame lobbying on it. Every single one of them, every single thing that we talk about, I'm going to blame lobbying. But
I think that's really true, because like the big, like, a lot of people like look at this as really great, climate legislation, and it realistically it's more the United States, I think, has pretty much ever done in the past. But at the same time, if you dig into the bill, to get Joe Manchin's vote, how they bought him, because they bought Joe Manchin, and because Joe Manchin was bought by, lobbyists from the West Virginia fossil fuel industry. Every time they want to kind of hand out funds in one of these different ways that the legislation set up, they have to auction off credits to allow companies to pollute the atmosphere. So they can't even give money without holding money to, or holding an auction off to the highest bidder who gets to pollute the planet.
To me, like, that's so insane.
Yeah,
that didn't change it the way that I meant it to.
So I think, like I said, theory good, practice bad.
Okay, let's pull this up so that for the people who are watching, there we go. Now you can still see our lovely faces through the live stream. So this is not the bill, but this is like a summary that they put up, a kind of where their money is going. So we have methane emissions reduction program. In total, it's 35.5 billion, and I believe this is over 10 years. So if this was the funds for the 10-year plan, it's not as much per year as it sounds. Methane emissions reduction program, that's going to provide 1.55 billion to EPA to issue loans, rebates, contracts, and grants to help the oil and gas sector reduce methane emissions. You've got the greenhouse gas reduction fund, that's going to have 27 billion. Climate pollution plans and implementation grants, that's going to have 5 billion. Environmental and climate justice block grants, going to get 3 billion. The climate justice is always an interesting term to me, but that is, if you're curious, it's going to be competitive 3-year grants to states, tribes, and municipalities, and a community-based nonprofit organization for financial and technical assistance to address clean air and climate pollution in disadvantaged communities. You've got 3 billion going to cleaner ports. You've got 1 billion going to cleaner medium and heavy-duty vehicles. You've got 250 million going towards environmental product information program. 60 million going to the Diesel Emissions Reduction Act, or DERA. 40 million to efficient environmental reviews. That's designed to improve efficiency in environmental reviews. You've got 460 million going to clean air and climate grants, 250 million going towards green federal buildings. I'll just pop us right here for a second. Green federal buildings, anytime that they offer like some kind of an initiative for like the including of buildings, like California did something similar, which was they're going to give people subsidies to put solar panels on their house. And what most people don't think about is that after 10 years, those are trash. And then they have to be replaced. It's like less than 20 years. But I mean, that's not just money that goes away, but also what do you do with the things that are supposed to be cleaner energies that wind up you they don't break down? Like it becomes one of the issues, like same for like the lithium batteries. Like you can't just get rid of those batteries. So the EVs have drawbacks. So when they pour money into these, something that I think we need to think about is, what is the trade-off? Like, yeah, you're not doing as much in emissions at the moment, but we got to look at the whole ecosystem of the climate change issue, and not just, okay, we've reduced it by this percentage point to not have as many diesel or gas-based automobiles, when we up the issues when it comes to just disposing of batteries and EVs, for example.
There's certainly an interesting trade-off of like mining to get a lot of the materials required to make solar panels in different ways poses a lot of environmental detriments. But usually writ large, when you look at the long-term impact, because you think about the waste generated by the extra aspect of a lithium-ion battery and an EV, but at the same time, you don't go through how many quarts of oil and the little cartons that it comes in and the boxes for the filter and the filter throughout the car's lifetime. Every 3 to 5 months, realistically, someone's going to be changing the oil. So every single car produces one of those filters encased in plastic, filter itself in its box, and then shipping that box from its manufacturing location to China and getting it across the sea. And none of that exists for the EV. Mm-hmm. So there certainly is that trade-off, but most of these technologies, even with the trade-offs they present, are going to be dramatically better for the overall environment than our current technologies.
Well, my question to that then is that trade-off enough to offset the amount of ecosystem damage that's done mining for these essential rare minerals that they need for the EVs? Because if you look at where they drill for oil, that has far less impact on that area in the environment than you have for like a lithium mine, for example. Like it looks like the Grand Canyon when they carved that out. They destroy the natural wildlife, they destroy the natural beauty. They just like all of that is just completely decimated.
Oh yeah. Well, there's no way to manufacture without consumption. We're going to consume.
Sure, and that's why I'm saying like what's I don't, and I'm asking because like I don't know the numbers, like that trade-off. To me, it seems like it does more damage to do that than it does to throw away a quart of oil container.
Well,
but I could be wrong.
Several billion quarts of oil. I said multiply that by several billion quarts of oil every year.
Sure. But like also I'm doing a comparison of like how much we have to mine for one EV. For one, I was trying to do it as much of a direct one-to-one comparison.
It's certainly a very catastrophic process for a lot of these mines, but they are still better in the long term. Wreck a few forests versus wreck the entire ocean.
And that there is a point there with the ocean that, you know, when you have an oil spill, if they're not careful, right? Like if, I don't know. But that can also be offset by having these pipelines, which we've shut down, instead of having them be transported through a barge. Tony, you looked like you were going to say something.
No, okay. Wait. I think I had a question. I think I forgot it, and now you put me on the spot, so I got to think about it.
All right. Well.
Oh yeah. How exactly do oil spills happen? Like, what exactly? Like for some real life examples, how exactly do oil spills happen? Like over the ocean.
Negligence at some level. I couldn't tell you exactly though.
I mean, it could just even be a case of, it could be, I'm sure like negligence has caused some, like that just is going to happen. But at the same time, imagine equally more just someone eventually bad luck happens. You know, you're holding a piece of equipment, the deck is, you know, slip, you know, you wet and you slip, something gets knocked out of line. Yeah, it's hard to say. I imagine each of them has a fairly quasi-unique cards, but I do know like some of those boats occasionally go down, like because you'll see the images of where there's just that massive oil ring around like a freighter going down or something.
Well, you've also got, I guess I would say like statistically, the more times you wind up transporting something, there's at least the opportunity for something to go wrong, right? And that was the argument for like why we needed some of these pipelines, because you're just shipping them and they're far less likely to spill than the oil barges or whatever.
And like even if they do spill, it's like on the ground versus in the water where now all of it's ruined, you know?
Right. Yep. But then, you know, it poisons the ground. So it's really, you're trying to just pick there's no right answer either.
Yeah. But think about it this way, right? Like if let's say it was traveling through the pipeline, right? Let's say there's sensors or whatever, and its sensor goes off and the pipeline's broken. So there's oil spilling, right? They can just shut it down. And that way they don't have to waste all of their oil. It's not like, oh, there's a crack in the pipeline. It's just got to keep going. We can't stop it, guys. I don't know, you know. But like, if let's say a barge goes down, right? All of that oil, all of it is gone, and now it's in the ocean.
Yeah, it's in the water.
Yeah, it's in the water. You can't ever get it back. You can't turn it off. It's just gone in the water. You know.
The transportation part of this, they're doing low carbon transportation, construction materials. That program provides $2 billion to support domestic manufacturing. Department of Transit neighborhood access and equity grants. That's going to provide $3 billion to state and local entities to improve multimodal transportation access and to mitigate pollution from transportation facilities. You got $100 million going towards efficient environmental reviews. Do any of you know what the reviews are off the top of your head? Because to me, I'm thinking like movie reviews, and I know that's not right. So.
It could be like audits.
Okay, that would make sense. Sounds like I don't know why we're putting this much towards the review, but
how much did you say was going towards it?
$100 million, but we also had reviews earlier. This is for like automobile audits.
So I was actually thinking about this while you were talking, right? You can call me a conspiracy theorist if you want, but whenever you were talking about like carbon, like less carbon ways of transporting the oil. Carbon reducing oil transfers or something. I forgot exactly. Yep. Oh, low carbon transportation construction materials. Yes.
Yeah.
When you're talking about that, and along with the reviews thing, it really makes it feel like sometimes, like this is why I have a problem with a lot of bills where they're just kind of like trying to throw money at a problem, because honestly, it's not like, obviously problems will require money, right? Like, so like
Right.
solutions require money to have, obviously, right? But sometimes I feel as though they spend too much money because they're just trying to line the pockets of people, right?
Yep.
So like for the low carbon transportation construction, that's $2 billion. For the reviewing part, how much was that? 100 million.
100 million for this part of the reviewing.
Right. And so it's like, how, like why do we need $2.1 billion to review and construction materials? I feel like, and maybe some of it actually is for that money, right? But I feel like he's just like, oh, that's 100 million. I could take 10 million of this here and give it to this person. 2 billion, I could probably take $250,000, take it here and give it to this person. You know, and it just feels like we're throwing too much money at a problem because we're just giving it to the rich.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you say conspiratorial, but like it's not, because we see that the way, like, look at Chicago, for example. They were always under construction. I used to live outside of that. We'd have to drive through it all the time. That was back when I was 11. So we're talking, you know, nearly 20 years ago. And this is just something that is perpetual traffic, perpetual redoing. And
yeah,
they're not, they don't need, look at Tennessee.
Home.
Tennessee does not need that long to do that. Chicago doesn't need that long. Like it's just, I am convinced, and this is where I'm becoming conspiratorial. I am convinced that it is just a way for the government to send people out there and they pay them, and then they pocket the rest through the taxes for their own pet projects, because they say, oh, well, we need the money for roads because they're garbage, but the people don't do anything when they're out there fixing it, and the money goes towards other stuff. That's what I'm convinced of.
I got 2 points for that one. One, that's how it was back home for me. I'm from middle Georgia, but like whenever you drive through Macon, I think it's like I-16 or something, that has been under construction since I was a little child. I'm currently 23, almost 24 years old. I have distinct memories of going through to parts of Macon and that part being under construction. There is no reason for it to take that long. I guarantee if you were to work at least 12 hours a day, you could have it done in 2 months. They've been on it for like 20 years. Okay. And two, I remember this one time, I don't remember if this was a true example or like a true thing that happened, or if it was just an example. But I remember once I was reading about something, and let's say they were talking about they needed to get a road done, right? And so the first company comes along, is like, hey, we'll do it for $1 million. It's like, okay. The second company comes along, it's like, hey, we'll do it for $2 million. Okay. Third company comes along, it's like, hey, we'll do it for $10 million. The guy pulled him aside. He's like, why are you trying to charge me $10 million? He goes, here's why. Because you pay me $10 million. I paid the smaller company $1 million to do it, since they already said they do it for $1 million, and then we keep the $9 million between us and we pocket it.
I've heard that. I don't know if it's true or not, but I mean, that's effectively how our government does things. And here's another way that it's wasteful. And this is anecdotal, but it's a personal example that I have. So where I live is right on the corner of a street, and the corner cement, like where the sidewalk meets the asphalt of the road, was all broken up because it's old, and they had it on both sides of the street. One is on the corner that I live on, and they sent a company out there this week to fix both sides. They sent 5 people out. One person is driving the little excavator to like break it up and move the stuff around. 4 people stood there doing nothing. My ring alarm went off and said, there's someone at your door, because there was 2 guys sitting on my stoop in like their blaze orange vests, not doing anything. And the company's paying them to do that. And that is how inefficient our government works. They take our tax dollars, and half the people just don't do the work then either when they're contracting under them.
Okay, wait, I hate to be that guy, but I've done a lot of construction work, and I know that's how it seems. I promise you, I know that's how it seems.
Sure, go ahead. Go ahead.
But sometimes there is literally nothing to do. It's like everyone has to wait for that one guy to do something so that they can. It's like, let's say they have to wait for him to break it up so that they can pick up the pieces manually and take it to the bin or the dumpster or whatever, right? Well, the thing is, because it's a heavy piece of machinery, you can't be anywhere near him. Right, that is a clear safety hazard. So you have to wait until he is completely done before you can do anything else. It's not like you know how like low wage jobs always like, well, I don't have anything for you to do, so go find something to do, or I'll find something for you to do. That's not how it works on construction sites. On construction sites, it's literally brain dead labor, where if you are not given something to do, you sit there and you wait until you ask your supervisor. If they give you nothing, you sit there and wait. And those are the moments that you pray for, honestly.
And just to be clear, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with the way that those people did it. I'm just saying that I think that in general, the government, you could apply this. This is on a local community-based level. And you know what? If it's the taxpayer dollars going to fund people who are doing an honest day's work, Have no problem with that. What I have a problem with is when we
Thanks.
upscale this to the federal government, what they do is they overpay their buddies to sit there and do nothing, or to do some busy work that doesn't require the amount of contracting money that they're saying it does, like in your story. And then they do sit around on something that maybe doesn't need to be brain dead labor, but they're still taking the tax dollars and putting it towards something that's inefficient. And I think the inefficiency argument still is going to sit there because the government is just largely inefficient.
I sometimes think we forget the scale that we're working with when we talk about United States government programs. Because if we look at that $100 million, per year, because I think this document we have shows the yearly spending and not the totality of spending. Not that the document itself says anything about that. So shame whoever came up with this document of switching the time frame of these figures and having to make much less sense. But look at that $100 million. So think about it. Then we break that down. So that's $2 million per state. And you're not going to break that down, evenly, because you're going to need more people out in California, more people out in New York, and stuff like that. So that's $100 million, $2 million per state to possibly review how many applications for every single construction project and every single road project or something that's going to be digging up part of a road that then touches the EPA's oversight, and they have to go through and look at the application for it, possibly send an auditor out there. And you think you got to do that for $2 million average per state? That's not a lot of money to even employ, let's say, 10 workers at an office, maintain an office space, and pay them to go drive across the state they live in, stay in hotels, eat whatever they're going to get reimbursed for because you're not taking advantage of these workers. That's a lot of money for the government to spend, going out and auditing and reviewing all these constructions. And it's real easy to spend $100 million on a nationwide project and not do it with that many employees. So I think with a lot of these things, when you actually look at them and, you can see the type of impact they'll make. And it's like, it's not a, particular ton of money. Even when we think about, $3 billion, Microsoft bought a video game company for like $70 billion. They bought Activision Blizzard for. A video game company got bought for 20 times this Department of Transportation grant. That's insane. So the economy and the amount of money we're working with is just really big, and you're never going to see, very small, government spending projects unless they are working on something really small, like a extra $40 million here or there for a government office. Just isn't a lot of money.
Which is fair. I'll give you that. Also, just a quick side note for anybody who's watching the live stream, that document is linked below if you want to go and read it more in depth. And also, if you're listening to the audio only version, that's linked in the description as well. So I've provided those for you. But back to Josh's point, I agree. Like, in the grand scheme of things, you're not looking at that much money. But here's the problem that I have. Every dollar that the government spends on a project is our tax dollars. They've taken it, and in theory, they're supposed to be putting it towards something that benefits us. And Josh, your point is still fair that it's going to be not necessarily equally distributed. But the problem that I have is, let's just look at the concept of climate change in general. They're trying to reduce our carbon emissions. If we went to net zero, completely just no carbon whatsoever, which they're not even shooting for, you would slow this down by less than, I think it was like a 1/10 of a degree, which means that no matter how much money we're putting into it, I am not convinced that the benefits long-term are being affected in the amount that we're pouring into it tax dollar wise, even though I do understand that that money is looking big picture at the federal government, not just like a single person spending, $400 billion, but it is still $400 billion of taxes that is not actually causing the solution that they're claiming that it will.
I mean, I don't think anyone thinks you could stop climate change anymore. It's become far too late for that. We're now just dealing with
the cake at this point. You're right.
So we're perpetually mitigating how terrible it's going to be and how many hundreds of millions of people might be displaced and tens of millions of people might die. We're talking about what it will become a global catastrophe. It will become the only thing we talk about as more and more of the world becomes quite literally uninhabitable because of our mistakes. And there's no going back to it. So I think when we come in 30 years, we'll look back and say, how could we have ever thought our arrogance could allow us to do so little? Because when we see the catastrophe we will have wrought, it will be quite literally unimaginable. And I think that's why we struggle with this so much right now, is we just can't comprehend the amount of damage we've done.
A lot of the climate change models, though, don't account, or actually, I don't think any of them account for the innovation. And so, for example, when you look at some of the seawalls that have been built in the lower south for hurricanes, they've actually, like Louisiana, has improved the amount that they can withstand from the climate change with the stronger storms because they put it into like their infrastructure and like building up things that will protect the cities. And I'm surprised that none of this bill goes towards anything for seawalls or anything for like nuclear. I think part of the bill goes towards nuclear, so I can't say that it doesn't go towards nuclear. But if we're trying to like really get off of this, I'm surprised that we're not putting
Lobbying.
more into those two. You're saying it's because of lobbying?
Yeah, hey, I'm blaming everything on lobbying. It's
But
what you gotta do.
but like which I could understand, except they are putting it into less efficient forms of the quote unquote greener energy because like wind, solar, those are not as efficient as nuclear would be. So why are we allowing the lobbying why is lobbying allowing those to be traded off, but like they wouldn't let nuclear?
I think everyone always has a bad taste in their mouth about nuclear.
That's fair. People are pretty ignorant with nuclear.
Like people think like they hear nuclear, oh, World War II, you know what I'm saying? Cold
The
War,
Soviets are coming.
on God, like to the bunker, comrade. Like you can't fucking get away from it. So I think that's why nuclear is always like frowned upon, because the lobbyists essentially don't allow people to get educated about it. And even if it did, it doesn't matter, because that I think nuclear would kill their profits much more than anything else would. Right? Like you yourself said, I believe, the less efficient forms of greener energy, right? Solar and wind, they're less efficient, right? But nuclear, once you actually have it built, because and you get all the people trained, obviously you don't want unqualified people in that field, right? Sure. But once you get all of it trained, it's the cost is lower, But we look at quite literally 4 examples of any kind of nuclear activity in history, and we swear off of it, even though the amount, even in taking those 4 atrocities, right, and 2 of which just being unlucky, right? Yep. But
are you counting Chernobyl?
Because
Chernobyl Japan, was it. I mean, we can chalk Chernobyl up to the fact that it was under the Soviets, and he had a bunch of yes men who were trying to get things done the cheapest way possible. It's like they don't have the same. So like, there's an issue with that. I mean.
Oh no, I agree. I'm just saying, but like, regardless, something bad did happen, Right. Well, so I'm counting Chernobyl, the reactor in Japan, and Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I'm counting those because we just think nuclear, we lump them all together, right? Right. So we take those 4 things that happened and we think, oh yeah, no, we can't allow that ever to happen again, even though 2 of those were acts of war, should have been war crimes, honestly. One of them was due to sheer incompetence of Russian authority, and one of them was truly and utterly a natural disaster. It was just unlucky. That one was literally just unlucky. Something like that would probably almost never happen in America, because Japan is known for its flooding, right? But the reactor really couldn't be put anywhere else. I mean, it could, but the same thing probably would have happened somewhere else eventually anyway, right? Unless you put it super far in on the mainland, which kind of screws you out of the way anyway, right? But even if you take all 4 of those and you look at all the people that it negatively affected, it still doesn't even somewhat compare to the amount of people who are negatively affected by natural gas and coal and yada yada.
Even if you take the worst predictions, the worst assumptions about Chernobyl, like those insane claims there, like millions of people died because
it would have wiped out half of Europe.
Still doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
Still doesn't come close. 4,000 people a day die in China from smog pollution alone. They choke to death on the fumes of industry. 4,000 people every day, today, yesterday, tomorrow, and for the foreseeable future. 4,000 human beings every 24 hours will choke to death on smog because they're just polluting with those. That's just a coal-fired mine. They're just pumping so much thing, in the air. It causes such
it's not even how much they're pumping it.
Cancer.
It's not even just like how much they're pumping. It's the fact that China has the biggest population in the world. It's like one of the biggest countries, but just like every other populated country, America included, all of the people live in one place. So you have a country with 1.4 billion people, where probably about 700 million of them live in, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I believe it's like 75% of the entire country's population lives on 25% of its land. I looked at a video once. I could be
roughly right for.
I could be wrong about that,
nation.
like the exact numbers, but I believe it's 75% lives on essentially 25% of the land. So 75% of 1.4, almost 1.5 billion people live in a country that's probably the size of our eastern seaboard, right? So it's not even like how much they're pumping; it's the fact that they all live on top of each other. It's the same thing with India, which is, we need to have an episode about just India. I could go on for hours about that.
So bringing up India and some of the other nations that use carbon-based fuels to modernize and kind of catch up to the rest of the world. One of the things that can come as a result of the US limiting themselves is fine, but like, especially when we start looking on the global scale and they're like, nope, sorry, I know that the US and China, all of them, we've already benefited from this, but now the rest of you can't. It does disadvantage those. And also the people who get most disadvantaged in the US are the lower class. And this bill in particular, just putting the tax dollars towards the EPA and things like that on its face won't necessarily, I don't think, damage them. But for example, when you have members of the current administration coming out and saying the point is that we make this hurt so that you'll switch over, not everyone has the financial, socioeconomic capability to be able to live that. And there's a problem there that it's not as accessible, but that is the reality. So my question then is, who winds up getting pinched the most? And to me, it seems to be the lower and the middle lower class, because they can't afford the new and more efficient Teslas and things. They get stuck with the crappy cars. And they can't afford the heat, like the natural gas heat in the winter. That affects the Midwest hugely because, it gets really cold. I just came from that area. It gets very cold in the winter, and limiting those and making that accessible, people will freeze to death.
I think issues like this kind of need to be broken down to, like, you could say a couple different versions of it, but kind of just in one of two ways. And that's the bigger picture versus the smaller picture. Right? Before I get onto that, I think that, like, yes, it's going to affect lower class and middle class more, right? Literally everything does, except for things like the French Revolution and the Russian Revolution, right? Outside of where they literally took their rich and powerful and hung them and guillotine and put them in the guillotine, it always affects the lower class more. Every action in history, right? Also because it kind of has to, because there's always more lower and middle class than wealthy people, right? So like, whatever it is, even if it negatively affects rich people, it's still going to negatively affect everyone else more, just because of like the numerical value of them.
Sure.
But the reason I say that the bigger picture versus smaller picture thing is because, yes, I would say that it would negatively affect people in, even poor people here, but like people in countries like, let's say, India and the poor people in China, right? Like not allowing green natural gases and coal and yada yada yada, right? Not allowing those kinds of things, but also allowing those countries with the biggest populations, just those two alone, have almost 3 billion of our almost 8 billion population. To allow them to keep essentially doing whatever they want to do, it not only affects the other 5 billion human beings, but also affects the other billions of human beings who will be born and who will exist at some point in time, assuming that we haven't killed ourselves due to climate change yet, right? So it sounds like that's another instance of us trying to be like the world police and house all the world power, right? It is it affects the poor people in this country, but it only matters when it's talking about something that affects us, right? We don't care about the poor people in Africa who are being trafficked, right? We don't care about the ethnic cleansing in China going on, right? Like we like to pretend a lot of these are okay. Let me not pretend. Some of us do, but we're ignorant about a lot of things going on in the world, right? So I won't say that we pretend that we don't know, because not everyone knows, but we are ignorant about a lot of the things going on in the world, right? Generally, we like as a whole, not individually, but as a whole, we don't generally care about too many people's problems, as long as it does, if there's no benefit in it, and that benefit being profit, of course, for us, right? So I don't see why it would be any. The only instance that I could see is that if we were to try to change something in India and China, and this is the only reason that I think it's ever brought up as a talking point, is because a lot of our manpower is in those two countries, right? Between the immigrants who come over here and do things like, and I'm not trying to stereotype, please just stay with me, but becomes due to like the immigrants who come over here from those two countries who do things like become the doctors, the engineers, the scientists, right? All sorts of STEM fields, right? Between them and then all of the physical manpower that we have for people that work in the factories in China and the people that we have on things like service lines in India, right? That's the only reason why I think that these two countries in particular are brought up as talking points.
So let me ask you this then. When we had like the Paris Climate Accords, which was the larger nations who have been developed through the use of carbon things, and now they're trying to police. You said that that's us trying to be the world police, and it seemed like you were saying we shouldn't do that. Do you think that something like that shouldn't be happening then? Or were you fine with that? Which
I think that if we're gonna police the world in certain aspects, then we need to like actually police them, because we can sit here and talk about India and China all we want, but like America can't and won't do anything about them.
No,
right?
And China's the largest emitter, and we can't get them to sign on with anything. So
China
this is
will
really just
literally do whatever they want.
And this bill does just deal within the U.S. So we can even stay within the U.S. and talk about whether or not this is good for us. Is this a good use of our tax dollars? Something else in here that's not on that sheet, but is in the bill, is they are including penalties for companies that don't meet their green standards. So they're setting an incentive structure for companies to do more with EVs, even though they're not quite as efficient, and for them to basically set penalties for the companies. They're saying that they're putting these, whether it be a tax or a fine or what have you, if they don't have a good enough score, a green enough score. But companies don't bear the brunt of that. They pass that on to the consumers. So, and this is why I brought up earlier that affects the middle and lower class the most, because even if we're not doing a number, because I think it's fair what you mentioned, Tony, that there is a greater number, but even on a one-to-one comparison, let's say it costs more. Someone who doesn't have that money is going to be more affected than someone who has a huge net worth portfolio, which means that when we have inflation, that individually disproportionately affects middle and lower class, not just because of them making up the majority of the demographics. So my concern then goes to the fact that when they include penalties for these companies, those companies are not going to have their bottom line be infringed upon. So they pass that on by just jacking up their prices and passing those penalties on to the lower class.
Yeah, that was one thing I saw when I was researching it. It's like, okay, cool. You know, like everyone always talks about like, you know, taxing companies more and taxing rich people more. And I agreed with that for the longest time. But as I got older, as I got wiser, I was like, you can't really do that. The only way that you can do that is if you pass other laws. That's pretty much like, hey, we're gonna jack up your prices, but if you touch your prices, then we're gonna keep fining you, right? Yeah. Like that. Like you have to essentially either A, incentivize the companies to not fire their workers or raise their prices, or B, punish companies for firing their workers or raising their prices if they try to do that after you, like, let's say, tax them more, right?
And if you punish these companies, then you kill any form of innovation, because capitalism requires risk, and no one will take on that risk if there's no reward. So if you fix my prices and you remove my capacity to move with the market, then I will just get out of that market. And that's what we see happening when they try to fix that, because the only way you can do that is through like a communistic structure, like we see in China, where they fix that, and then you drive down innovation. The only way you can fix that then is if you remove the free will by telling people, no, you're gonna do this. So like it becomes, the more they do this, what they're setting up for, I think, is more government involvement. Tony, you mentioned earlier that the government at times will almost create a problem and then put money towards it. That's what they're doing here, because you know what they turn around and they say during election time? Well, those greedy mother effers, you know, they come out, they pass the tax laws. They created the problem. The companies respond. The politicians come back. And it's a perpetual cycle.
Yeah, I've realized that about for a while. That's why I don't consider myself on the left or the right, because I think that in terms of political parties, I think both the Democrats and the Republicans, I think they're both idiots. Because the problem is let's say there is a legitimate issue. No one's making up an issue, right? Let's say the Civil Rights Act, okay? You have one party that says, no, we're not for this. Then you have the other party that says, yes, we're for this. And then they just sit there and they just keep butting heads back and forth. Like someone on the left could make a good point, but the person on the right will disagree just because the person on the left made the good point. Yep. Right. And it just feels like it's just back and forth butting heads. The power changes. Like one party gets the power. It's like, wow, we're going to do so much better than those last idiots in power. Then they get power and they have the power. Then they lose it. Dang, those idiots had the power for the last 30 years and they still haven't done anything. Now you got to give us the power. And then, but it's not like it's a power like 90%, 10%. No, it's always like slightly more than 50. Yep. So nothing ever gets done. You just get in a permanent gridlock and literally nothing can ever get done. Meanwhile, we're making it every day of our lives. We're making it harder and harder for like us to be able to have children. You know, like to be able to have a world where our children can live up and essentially live a full life the way that my generation can. And then that's debatable. Yep. Because I'm only 23. So
well, and on the note of what you were just saying, Tony, like I think that people need to bear that in mind as they go into the midterm season and as they vote. Like, you know, vote with who you're going to vote for. That's fine. But keep in mind that right now the Democrats are claiming that they're being obstructed, but they're the ones who hold the power. And they've held the power for so long too. The last time that they didn't hold the power, Donald Trump was in office and the Republicans were the ones saying that they were obstructed. So this cuts both ways, but currently it is the Democrats who are just using this to drum up their votes. And that's why they pass these bills, is because, well, politics, the fewer problems you can solve while in office, but you can also maintain the image of I'm trying to fix these problems, the longer you get to hold on to your power. And that's really all that they're doing.
That's why a whole lot of that virtue signaling with the Roe v. Wade nonsense was so annoying. Like with people on the left saying, it's like, y'all could have codified this so long and you chose not to. Please stop talking. Like, you had the chance to fix it and you chose not to.
Because like even now there's only, there's that narrow 50 vote hold that they have. So they can be obstructed in some ways because, they can't close up the filibuster. They can't spend new money and they can't raise taxes very easily,
Yep.
But
not entirely true.
Not entirely. You can do through the Reconciliation Act, because which
is limited to your credit, but they can still do it.
But what I'm also trying to get to is when Barack Obama was first elected, they had a supermajority. They could have passed anything they wanted. They had the full Senate and full House locked down, could get over any filibuster. The Democrats had the power to make the world into anything they wanted. And they couldn't agree on giving us a public option in the Affordable Health Care Act. Like when we're hoping for public medicine and they can't even they won't even let us pay them for medicine. They're like, no, you still got to go to private corporations over it. You're both so incredibly right on the maintaining the status quo.
People are afraid to change.
There's a great author who I read about in a lot of my mass communication readings. A fellow by the name is Stuart Hall. He came out of British Cultural Studies movement. Does a lot of linguistic studies, and one of his books is called "Policing the Crisis," and it just looks about how. And there's a lot of, if you go and look at contemporary research into authoritarian systems, one of the things you'll find really strongly through all of the literature is that these political parties, regardless of where they're from in the world, whether in the South or in the North or in the East or in the West, wherever across the world, they look to manufacture crises and make the world seem as if they're the ones who the people need to make a difference and make something possible. They justify themselves by creating these problems or creating the appearance of problems and acting like they're the ones running to the aid. And it's not even that they're deadlocked, I'd say. I would say for most of our sitting politicians, they don't want the status quo to change.
No.
They're all extremely wealthy. They're all friends with extremely wealthy. The current system, what we're going with right now, works extremely well for the extremely wealthy. So they don't want nothing to change. They like it exactly as it is.
Well, and on that note of the wealthy, let's talk briefly about the IRS, because they just did, I think it was 87 billion or something like that to go towards more IRS agents. And the reasoning for this was we want to, and they say this buzzword, we want to close the tax loopholes, which I'll get to in just a second here. But also they say that they're trying to pick up lost revenue. Now I'll give them that portion because the IRS does lose money by not being able to close in on it, but it's not exactly the way you think about it. Now, when they say that they're going to close tax loopholes, all they mean, and they also say the rich need to pay their fair share. The problem with that statement, both of those, is that there's no loopholes to be closed. You can change the tax codes, but what happens is once you reach a certain amount of wealth in your portfolio, you become very concerned with paying the minimal amount of taxes that you have to. And you pay your accountant, and you have great lawyers to make sure that you are within the bounds. They've done nothing illegal, or else they'd be indicted and charged, and they'd be stripped of all their assets. But they find ways to write off the most that they can and to pay the least they can in taxes. So the only way that the Democrats could actually close those is if they change the tax codes. And what they just did in this last conglomerate bill of the Inflation Reduction Act was they basically made it so that the lower and middle class are going to be audited more. Not the super ultra wealthy. None of your politicians because they sure as hell are going to make sure that they're fine. And here's how we know this. And I've included one in this link, the study that showed that basically you're more likely to be audited if you make under 200,000 a year. So you've got, I mean, that's like middle upper class at that point. But the ultra wealthy that they claim to go after do not get audited in the same way. The other reason we know this is because Republicans proposed an amendment to this bill that said that you would not be allowed to use this new funding for the IRS to go after lower and middle classes, and the Democrats voted it down completely. So it passed, and they wanted that left open. What that tells me anyway, and what I think is the reasoning for this, is they don't want to be the ones who are audited. They don't want the gaps to actually be closed with the people who have the wealth. They just want to, again, string people along to thinking that I'm just satisfied with my situation. Corporations, the ultra wealthy, they're the ones to blame, but they never pass legislation that touches those people. And that's my thought on that, but I'm curious what you guys think.
I think that amendment would have been bureaucratic nightmare. How could you hire on a whole bunch of new employees and then say, well, they can only deal with cases making them of this amount of dollar amount? Like, that'd be a horrible.
I think it was symbolic, but
I mean, yeah, but that's like still a massive problem for the IRS. They have to then enter everyone into a database. Employees hired with this money, employees hired with that money. These employees hired with this money can only investigate these cases. And it's just like, no, they just need regular IRS employees. So they're not going to put special language into their contracts for $80 billion worth of new employees over 10 years, which the IRS desperately needs. Don't get me wrong. It's like the IRS has been losing a lot of agents and is going to see a significant number of employees retire out here in the next 10 to 15 years. So they really do need to refurnish the ranks of the career personnel who work at the IRS. But it does seem to be pretty off the walls to have a piece of legislation in there that would then stipulate like a supervisor reviewing and then keeping track of which employees were hired when and with what government monies, so they could assign out which cases they're allowed to investigate. That's just that's bureaucracy there.
It's a fair point. I understand where you're coming from that, Josh. I think to me it does bother me though that when you have the theory and you have the application, and this still stands despite the fair point that you raised with the bureaucratic nonsense and the bureaucratic nightmare that it would be. But they are not, the IRS is not going after people who actually have the money that would be able to fund these bills. They go after the people like us who don't have the funds to fight the IRS when they accuse you of something. And they bury you in legal fees. Like the IRS is the only federal institution where you are essentially, if they accuse you of something, you're guilty until proven innocent. Everywhere else, they need probable cause. But the IRS basically just has to say, here's the problem, and you have to fight to prove that you're innocent. It's not the other way around like it's supposed to be. You're basically stripped of your innocence until proven guilty.
The IRS usually preemptively has evidence that you've cheated on your taxes, though, because your employer reports your income to the IRS. And so if you file a fraudulent tax return that doesn't match what, all of the different tax forms that your employer sent the IRS, then they're going to know you're underreporting your income. The problem, and both the Secretary of the Treasury, Janet Yellen, and the current chief of the IRS have pointed out, though, what really comes down to where a lot of these taxes that are being avoided, and it's estimated some $600 billion doesn't get, collect, $600 billion of unpaid taxes out there. And what the IRS primarily suspects is happening is that people who do not file income reports that are filed by their employers, so people who are making profit, stock options and different other non-wage income that's not being reported on like a 1099 or 1040, those things don't have a duplicate record that's sent to the IRS to let them know something's fraudulent. They have to do a proper investigation and check, say, all of your corporation's records, track all of the checks from there, hop through any shell companies you've probably set up to make, to hide your financial trail. And then the IRS can figure it out. You're not reporting what you're making, yourself. Versus, and part of the reason they do audit people who make less than $200,000 a year is because the boss sends them the proof that you lied on your taxes. The IRS knows exactly how much you make, and that's why the IRS is capable of doing your taxes. But as Tony was pointing out several times now, lobbyists get in the way of IRS doing our taxes for us because they have all the information already. They don't need our involvement. They could just do our taxes for us. TurboTax is a fraud.
So that's true. Why? Tell me a little bit more about how the lobbyists get in the way of that. I'm unfamiliar with the specifics of how the lobbyists are the ones preventing that from happening.
Oh, they spend like hundreds of millions of dollars every so often on these gigantic lobbying campaigns, like in particular, it's Intuit who owns a lot of different
Okay.
financial products, QuickBooks,
Yep.
TurboTax. But they've lobbied the government because there's a law on the books that prevents the IRS from doing everyone's taxes for them. And so then they have their fake free tax things, which you can actually get a proper free one if you go to irs.gov.
Yeah.
When it comes to tax season, you keep that in the back of your pocket.
Yeah. You can
'cause
also
a
get
lot
it
of
done.
the-
I think didn't Hassan Minaj put together something to help with that too?
Yeah, there's a couple easy ways to do it. Because if you go to the TurboTax website, like if you live in a state that has state taxes, they'll try to charge you for your state taxes. But if you go through the IRS's link, you'll get your state and federal taxes done for free. But the reason all of it's like that for your tax return is that these tax return filing companies lobby the federal government for legislation to keep it that way. Like just so their industry can exist when the IRS has all of the data to do the tax information already. But so, and that's why, so the IRS has a ton of information on day-to-day workers, 1040s and all those other paperwork. But these big corporate profits are much harder to track. And so quite literally hundreds of billions of dollars. I think the IRS, I think on the website estimated it was like $7 trillion since the early 2000s has gone uncollected.
Like I said, it's the lobbyists.
Yeah, it really is.
Like other countries, like their taxes, they just have them done. It's just they just get it taken out of their check and they don't have to worry about it. It's not done that way here because it's meant to be purposely difficult. It's meant to be hard, so that on the off chance that you're an idiot and you forgot, or you don't know, or you don't understand, or you don't have the money to pay someone to do it, they'll just throw you in jail for it.
Yeah. Well,
it's not supposed to make sense except for the people. It doesn't make any sense except to the people that it makes sense. That's how can Donald Trump and Bezos and Elon Musk not pay any money in taxes? They're not breaking any laws. They are doing it completely legal. They're not doing anything. I mean, it's morally and ethically wrong. Yes. They're not doing anything legally wrong. There's nothing. They actually get the government to pay them money in taxes. Do you know that?
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, one way that they could do that is if you can write stuff off, and also if you have a loss, you can count that forward. Although I don't have a finance degree, so I can't tell you exactly which sections these relate to. But in the Bill Me segment that I did, the part 1 that deals with the new tax reform that they passed, they are restricting what can be counted as a loss and things like that. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. So Tony, you said that it's morally and ethically wrong. Can you tell me a little bit more about why you're saying that
if taxes are supposed to be, if taxes are paid so that we can, have money for our government and do things like fix roads, pay our teachers, pay our policemen, pay our governors, pay our any state representative at literally any level, right? And, do things that we need as a country, to not pay taxes is morally and ethically wrong. Because that means that you're basically saying F your community. Now, if you're not paying taxes, but you are putting money back into the community, like let's say Bezos starts a company that fixes roads, right? Sure, you could say it's a write-off, but it's doing the right things for the wrong reasons, but you're still doing the right things, right? Like the roads are still getting fixed, right? Or like what, and whatever it may be for whatever example. But if you're not putting any money towards your community and you're not paying taxes, it's morally and ethically unjust.
Well, an important distinction on that note to make here is that your community only gets the taxes that are collected from, let's say, like property taxes, like schools are collected through that. So when I pay federal tax and state tax, it doesn't go to that stuff. So that's the interesting breakdown on the taxes, that it really, you might have some stuff, but like it, by and large, your schools and like your community things are funded through property taxes and other taxes in the local area. It's not done by the federal government. It's not really done by the state level. Some state level things might be, they're going to be funded through your state level taxes. But I don't know. I guess I'm more of the opinion that we should be collecting fewer taxes overall. People should be paying less in taxes overall. That should be going directly back into their pockets so that they can then use that as a way, instead of, I don't know, these other proposals of like, let's, I don't know, raise minimum wage. Like you could achieve the same amount by just reducing the amount of taxes. But I don't know. I just don't think that the IRS needs the agents to collect more taxes on the people who are already in the classes that are less likely to have those funds in the first place.
It truly does play out, because we can also even see like who the IRS audits is ultimately set, an agenda by the day-to-day agents. It's always interesting, the IRS is one of those agencies of where who's president day to day isn't going to affect operations there. Like you don't expect much to change at the Department of Justice or the IRS, FDA. Realistically, too much when a new president comes in, because you're not gonna the president's not going to come in and give an order, hey, start doing this, because most of what those federal agencies do and the work they're assigned and the things they do undertake is written out, if not very explicitly by Congress, very explicitly by one of the executive offices who wrote the rule, which is a very interesting legal thing here in the United States, what a rule is versus a law versus an executive order. But when Congress passes a law and tells an executive department to do something, Congress, gives the money and creates the institution itself, and then says, now you got to do something. But the law's a little vague, and it just says you should take this stuff and do this, work towards this goal. Well, the question is, well, then what's that goal? Well, then these nerds at the destination agency that's receiving the funds sit down and write out these very long briefs about what the rule is, and it tells people how to act and behave. And the rules run the federal government. So it is hard to know exactly what these agents will do, are doing. The way the IRS has been talking and the way the Treasury Department has been talking, that they're really focused on coming in and recouping these losses. They're talking about they're hopeful to regain, an estimated $300 to $400 billion, back, which realistically would dramatically pay for not only the climate legislation, but if we give the IRS $80 billion over 10 years and they come back with hundreds of billions of dollars, then that's making the government money and collectively dutifully owed taxes that are currently being underreported and misrepresented to the federal government.
Now, that would assume, though, that they actually put that money towards the bills that we're signing off on. It's like, hey, that's a good idea. Like, Josh, if you think that these climate bills and these initiatives are good, I mean, unfortunately, the reality, though, is that the government isn't necessarily going to put the tax dollars towards that in the future. I mean,
money's fungible.
Unfortunately, yes. Tony, last thoughts on the IRS before we go into our hot takes, and you give us your final thoughts.
I think that maybe there is, maybe I missed it, but I think there should definitely needs to specify out of all of the new agents that they're hiring. I think that they need to specify that because people are going to be afraid that they're going to be coming for the average man, the middle class worker or whatever. So I think there needs to be something that is specified that says, hey, these new agents or whatever who are going to be used for auditing are not going to be used for anyone who does not make a certain amount of money.
I agree with that. Josh thinks it's going to be a bureaucratic nightmare.
What do you mean?
Well, just keeping up with who's assigned to investigate what cases and who's allowed to investigate what places. You enroll in the office, supervisor starts handing out cases and who's going to do what. And it's like, oh, wait a minute, you're a new hire. You can't investigate that person.
I mean, but I feel like that's not too terrible. And also the reason, Ryan, the effed up part about that, do you want to know why that wouldn't even matter?
Sure.
Because the thing about it is, even if they hired all of the new agents, it's like, okay, all of these new agents are not going to go after anyone who makes below this certain amount of money. All they would do is take all of the old agents and now just put them on the case for like all the people. Like,
money's fungible, duties are fungible. Like
it doesn't matter. So I mean, I don't know. I cannot believe there are not enough people that make above whatever the amount of money is that they're mainly targeting. Right? There's not enough people above there for them to justify hiring that many new agents.
I agree.
So all it means is that they're going to be auditing more people, but the more people are not the ones that we need to go after.
Right. I really think that what Josh is mentioning as far as them selling, this is what we're going to recoup. I don't think they're going to recoup it because I don't think that I think they're digging in the wrong spot, to quote Indiana Jones. All right. We will be right back with our hot takes. Stay tuned. You're listening to the Central Hub for Political Discourse. All right. Remember that you can help us out massively by subscribing. We are getting closer and closer to 100 subscribers on our YouTube channel. So help us out liking and subscribing. And if you can follow us on our social medias, that also helps because then you know what we're doing when we're having wonderful guests on, some diverse thoughts like Tony. Tony, I did put your last socials and such in the description below. So you guys should go and follow those. Are those still active and good? We were talking a little bit about TikTok censorship before we got on here. Are those still viable?
Yeah. I don't know why, but I got banned for a week. I was like, I'm going to cry if I get permabanned, bro. I just got unbanned. I just hit 30K. I can't do this. I can't even right now. So I was literally sending, and like I said, I didn't break any rules. I was literally sending in 2 to 3 tickets a day. Hey, this is me again. Unban me, please. I broke no rules. Hey, this is me again. Unban me, please. Like literally just 2 to 3 tickets a day. It's like, I will keep going until you unban me. This is ridiculous.
Wow. All right. Where can they? So you can find just at Between the Liars. We have Instagram, we have Twitter, and you can catch our live streams on our Facebook page, our Twitch page, and our YouTube page. Tony, they can find you on TikToks. What is the user handle for that?
TonyTalks TikTok. So TonyTalks, but not the full TikTok. It's just TT.
Okay, just like his name in the chat here.
Yeah.
All right, and Josh, you want to tell them a little bit about the memberships that we offer if they're interested?
Yeah, you can support what we do here on our show through the membership program, which will give you access to our behind-the-scenes content, which is usually, as we were talking about, Ryan referenced our conversation about TikTok censorship stuff that is available in our Discord and other cool things that we do. And it is also, on top of that, the extra best step way beyond even just liking and subscribing to stay up with all of our content and make sure you don't miss any exciting announcements.
Yes. And one special announcement to give Ken Drew from Taboo Topic a quick plug. He and I are doing a limited series called Blueprint, where we basically imagine we complain a lot about the issues we see with the government, but every week we take a specific topic and say, what would we do to change this? So for example, episode 1 is out now on our podcast platforms. So Spotify, Apple, etc. You can, that first topic dealt with congressional term limits. Started pretty uncontroversial. Like most people I talk to are like, yes, term limits are a good thing. And what we do is we actually pose this as like a constitutional convention. Like what could we physically do today as the people to execute whatever issue we're talking about? So we just kind of brainstorm. So if you're interested in that, those will air Fridays on our podcast platforms, and we'll eventually start live streaming those. Having a very difficult time uploading those, no surprise, with my criminally terrible Wi-Fi. So stay tuned for those if you're interested, and we'll go back and I'll kick off our hot takes. Okay, I'll try to make this short and sweet. I think that one of the issues I have with things like the Green Initiatives and like with the issues that the Democrats keep trotting out, especially in an election year, is that the Democrats are really twisting the facts to fit their agenda. Like, it's not to say that climate change doesn't exist, but rather they use it to justify a bill that I don't think, when we look at the specifics, attacks the issues they claimed that it did when they went to pass it. So then to me, it's hard to not sell that as a political ploy, just keeping themselves in power. And Republicans do it too, but this bill passed along party lines, so I'm going to pick on the Democrats. I think face value, it is ridiculous to be spending $400 billion when we're in the midst of a recession. Like, I don't care what you're spending it on. They don't have the money, so they're going to be raising taxes. That's just bottom line what's going to be happening. It's going to affect all of us to a degree. It might affect you less if you're in a lower tax bracket, but you're still going to be paying more in taxes. This is probably the hottest take I'll give: abolish the IRS. And we don't have time to really get into that, but I don't think that a federal 3-letter agency, any of them, should have as much unilateral power as they do, because of if they have this potential to go after people that just do not have, and we've seen this happen at times, they just don't have the funding to be able to fight it, and they don't go after the people that the Democrats say that they will when they give them that expansion. So being someone who likes limited government, I don't like a large government where they are responsible and voted in by the people. I don't like a 3-letter branch that just is hired and unleashed on the people with that amount of power. And on that note, I don't think that Congress should be able to raise taxes on us with a bare majority like they just did. It should not be 50 plus the vice president vote to raise our taxes and then unleash the IRS on us to get it. And that's my last hot take.
My hot take is the IRS fear-mongering has been one of the most hilarious political things I've seen in my life. Just to and I'm really going to so in the next 5 years, there's going to be 50,000 IRS employees who are up for retirement. And that's just in the next 5 years. This plan to hire 86,000 new IRS agents, which wasn't even a part of legislation. It's been an internal document at the IRS about their hiring protocols and what they hope to do over the next 10 years. So if they have 50,000 people coming up for retirement in 5 years, and they're hoping to hire 87,000 people over 10 years, then the question comes in to be that we actually might end up with net less IRS agents with our current hiring protocol than we have right now, which, as there is a problem, is a serious problem, because right now only 2.2% of millionaires' tax returns gets audited. Only 2.2% of millionaires' tax reports get audited. We're not investigating where all of the serious money is, and if the IRS and the Treasury Department's making a dedicated effort to make a change where taxes can be properly collected, that are all due. These are not even just loopholes. These are just people not reporting the actual amount of money they're making and lying to the government and lying about how much taxes they should be paying by the current books in the law. These people are breaking the law. For your average small people, just don't intentionally lie on your taxes. They're not going to give you any trouble if you accidentally mess up. They're going to send you a letter saying, hey, your refund's been rejected. You need to file an amendment document. You're going to go, oh, oops. And then you're going to fix your form and send it in, and everyone's going to have a cup of coffee. And the final hot take, climate change is literally going to kill us all. By the tens of millions of people are dying, and the amount of people who are going to suffer, it's not even going to really be the fault of it. It's the fault of these imperial countries that developed their empires off the back of fossil fuels and destroyed other countries, not only in economies by extracting resources out of them, but destroying local wildlife, overfishing their seas, and polluting their lands, and taking and destroying rampantly. And these countries are going to be the ones who have the economy to shelter themselves from the benefits and not pay the price of it, of the ecological wrath they incurred from our planet. And the answer to this is, we can only make it a slightly bit better, but we're all still going to lose something dear. And I'll tell you this, life in society stops functioning at 50 degrees Celsius. And the closer the more and more days we have closer and closer to that 50 degrees Celsius line is pretty frightening. We already seen how devastating a 45 or 42 degrees Celsius day can be for a lot of Europe. Bump that up to consistent, maintain 50 degrees Celsius like we're going to see in 20, 30 years, and things are going to be awful.
What is that in Fahrenheit? I legitimately don't know.
122
You're speaking
degrees.
to Americans. There we go.
Yeah, about
Okay.
120.
Yeah. I just Googled it as he said it because I was like, I was like, I could do the math.
Speaking to Americans.
It's like, I can
Fahrenheit.
do the math in my head, but I don't want to.
I'm not doing that in my head.
It's not bad. It's just 1.8 times. It's just 1.8 times 50 plus 32. So what's 2 times 50? 2 times 50 is 100. 1.8 is 3.6. So that'd be like 96 point something plus 32, and then it's easy. Something like that. I'm close. Yeah.
It's about
yeah. My hot take. I don't even know if I have a hot take on this one. I kind of agree with both of y'all, actually. Basically disband the IRS, or at least make it like maybe not even disband it, but put it on a state-to-state level. I could see that one working too. Am I muted? No. Okay, just had to make sure because my symbol was gone, so I wasn't sure. The layout changed, and I was like, wait, where's my symbol? I don't know. And I've been thinking about the climate change thing a lot. I really like because the older I get, it's like, okay, if climate change is really gonna kill us by 2050, let's say 2050, right? That means if I were to have 23, if I were to have kids right now, right at this very moment, that means that they wouldn't even live until they were 30 before essentially just life starts ending. But it wouldn't even matter if I don't have the money and resources to make sure that they can live the best possible life until that point, right? So, and I think it's immoral to doom an organism to a life of to a life of death. You know what I mean? Like it's to have a child right now, like knowing the position that we may be in, and even possibly will be in, is morally irresponsible. That's the way that I say it. I hope that isn't the case, and I hope that we can get this shit situated. But I don't know.
All right. Well, Tony, thank you for joining us. It's always good having you on, and we will have you on again at some point. Remember that you can find Between the Liars on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, Twitch, and Google Podcasts. Catch our live streams. We've got stuff on Monday or Tuesdays and Thursdays and Fridays. So follow us so that you can stay updated. And if you enjoy this show, we would greatly appreciate a 5-star review and help us beat that algorithm. Put us out there on Facebook. Share us with your friends. And I'm sure you find yourself somewhere between the liars. Goodbye for now.